Between the 50s and 90s in Japan, thousands of 16 and 19-year-olds, thirsty for rebellion, lovers of discotheques and amphetamines, covered under long parkas and armed with their identity icon, their motorcycles. They went out to defy social norms, terrorize society, and provoke disturbances to such an extent that they led to the creation of a police department dedicated exclusively to contain them. This is the story of the most dangerous motorcycle tribe in Japan. Let's place ourselves geographically and temporally to understand much better. After its devastation in World War II, the land of the rising sun embarked on an unprecedented journey of reconstruction and recovery. The post-war period saw Japan rediscover its cultural identity, embracing modernization and westernization, while keeping its centuries-old traditions ingrained. The 1950s in Japan witnessed a society in transition, where popular music and new fashion trends coexisted with the veneration of traditional values. The streets of Tokyo were filled with automobiles, while in Japanese homes, families gathered around their radios to enjoy entertainment programs. The Japanese economy boomed in this decade, driven in part by the Korean War, which generated demand for manufactured goods. This period marked the beginning of what would later become known as the Japanese economic miracle, which would lead the country to become a world economic power. It is in this scenario of change and resurgence that unique subcultures were born, such as the bosozoku, our protagonist, which defied conventions and would mark its history. This dangerous subculture emerged when the car industry began to expand throughout the country. Before the bosozoku there were the kaminari-zoku, Thunder Tribe, similar to the British rockers, motorcyclists who used this means of transportation as a banner of rebellion and dissatisfaction against society. The difference of the bosozoku is that they tended to come from lower social classes, and their biker gang was their mode of escape from a world that seemed to turn its back on them. But what was their discontent? Here I bring you the 5 keys. After World War II, Japan was in precarious economic and social conditions. Young people at that time felt that they did not have many opportunities and were dissatisfied with the situation in the country. During this period, Japan was experiencing increasing westernization and exposure to foreign popular culture, including music, fashion, and movies. This Western influence contributed to the formation of a generation of young people who sought autonomy and individuality. Motorcycles became a symbol of rebellion and freedom for young people. Access to two-wheeled vehicles allowed the bosozoku to escape social restrictions and enjoy a sense of independence. Post-war Japan also brought with it a re-evaluation of cultural identity. Young people sought ways to challenge the rigid social norms of the past. The bosozoku were often seen as rebels against authority and established norms. At a time when obedience and conformity were highly valued in Japanese society, these youth groups sought to challenge the status quo and make their voices heard. One of the most distinctive characteristics of the bosozoku is their keen interest in customizing their motorcycles, often illegally. For the most part, these motorcycles were 4-cylinder, and members of the bosozoku would modify them by removing the mufflers to generate a deafening noise. In addition, they often engaged in reckless driving activities, causing havoc on the streets. During the 1950s and 1960s, these practices were much more common, and bosozoku could hinder traffic by driving at incredibly slow speeds in some areas or unceremoniously ignoring traffic lights. The police, faced with the growing problem, even assigned a special department to escort them when they arrived in certain areas, in order to prevent accidents, and gave them the nickname Maruso. But customizations and street shenanigans were only part of this subcultural world. All members carried weapons, ranging from wooden sabers and baseball bats to pipes or even Molotov cocktails. In addition, they used to wave flags with national symbols and were inspired by kamikaze pilots. Aesthetics were of utmost importance to them, and they decorated their motorcycles with bright colors, flags and icons that identified their group and their owner. In their heyday, some bosozoku subgroupings, such as Black Emperor, not only engaged in criminal activities, but also in political affairs. Some of their members became activists against the Vietnam War. However, internal conflicts between the groups led to disputes and the emergence of new factions. The documentary Goodspeed You! Black Emperor by Mitsuo Yanagimachi chronicles the exploits of this particular group. I won't give you any more spoilers in case you want to see it. Black Emperor used to incorporate the manji into its aesthetic, a symbol that may look similar to the Nazi swastika, but actually has deep roots in Buddhism and Hinduism. On maps, it is used to mark Buddhist temples and represents the spiral on the chest of the Hindu god Vishnu. The Nazis appropriated the swastika, which actually has more than 50,000 years of history, and misused it. During the 1980s and 1990s, the bosozoku often traveled in massive groups, sometimes with more than 100 members, allowing them to intimidate drivers and cause damage to vehicles and street furniture. Although the movement and its violence have declined over the years, at their peak in the 1980s, these gangs reached over 40,000 members, and in the 2000s that number has declined considerably. The truth is that, as with some urban tribes, the former members of this gang, who used to terrorize passers-by with their loud motorcycles, have evolved over time. Today, many of them are parents and have left their gang life behind. What remains are memories of those young men who once roamed the roads like bullets, ignoring traffic lights and spreading terror, perhaps in search of freedom.